Hello, YouTube family, and welcome to our Journey Through the Bible, our new series here at Emmaus Road Productions. In this series, we take each chapter of the Bible and do a verse-by-verse exposition. At the end of each video, we will post discussion questions that you can think about on your own, engage in the comments section if you want to, or use these for small group discussions. In today's study, we're going to start, obviously, at the beginning of everything with Genesis chapter 1. With all we see going on in the world today, you may be wondering, why would a YouTuber talking about biblical stuff start in Genesis and rather than some of the more prophetic scriptures? Well, I want my channel not to be a channel that's meant for just today, but it's a channel that can be used for any Christian who's just beginning their journey through the Bible. So, without further ado, let's look at Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 2. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So we are 2 verses into the Bible, and you may already be hit with something that may be challenging, a presumptive idea that you have before you even start reading the Bible. In our modern society, we are educated to believe that our existence is part of a natural process, things such as the Big Bang Theory. You watch Discovery Channel, History Channel, you go to school, you learn about the Big Bang Theory, that in the beginning there was a great point, smaller than an atom, of immense energy that exploded, releasing all this matter, which eventually coalesced into stars and galaxies and planets. And that's one of the evidence, or that's one of the prevalent theories today. So, when it comes to the Big Bang Theory, you look at it and you just move the problem of the beginning. Where did that point of matter start from? Okay, if that's the way God did it, then where did that one point come from? Some people may say that the Big Bang fits in perfectly with the scriptures. Personally, I don't think so, because when we look later on and we see rationale, you saw in my introduction, I believe that the world that we know around us is started around 4000 BC. The Big Bang Theory, involves millions and billions of years. In fact, in recent times, we've had to adjust our secular science to originally, I think the universe is supposed to be 13.4 billion years old. That's what I learned in school. But now, maybe more than 14 billion, because we're now observing stars with better satellites and better telescopes that are further in distance than 14 billion years. Just for the non-scientist in the room, a light year is a measure of distance, not of time. Basically, a light year is the distance a beam of light travels within a year's time frame, or a Earth year's time frame. So we use it as a measure of distance because space is so big, so vast. Another secular theory is evolution, that from the Big Bang you have all this dust and matter and stuff, and so then all of a sudden a bunch of it starts to be drawn together by gravity, and that matter begins to fuse, being helium, the lightest atoms start to fuse, and and becomes denser and denser and denser until it becomes so heavy that the atoms actually start fusing together, creating helium and all these other elements that we see in the universe. And then around the sun, the remaining dust starts to gather together and collect and become the planets, whether a gaseous planet like Saturn or Jupiter or Neptune or Uranus, or your rocky planets like Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, the moons, the asteroid belts, Pluto. Oh, that's right, Pluto's not a planet anymore. So, and then the biological function of this, where did we come from? I'm speaking to you, I exist, so where did I come from? Well, on this third rock from the sun, there was this, thick methane atmosphere and, all these chemicals and stuff, and, static electricity caused lightning to go through, and that created the first amino acids, which started building proteins, and those proteins organized themselves into a double helix structure that we know as DNA, and that DNA began to come together and make other life forms, and those life forms became more and more complex to adapt to their environment. Now, each one of these theories, there are tons of debates out there. I could very easily go down a deep, 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 deep rabbit hole trying to go through each of these things. But, I'm looking at the Bible in this study. I'm taking it for what it says. Christians are often presented as being anti-science, and this often sets up a debate between science and faith. But science and faith are not opposites. It is true that people of faith have proposed some silly stuff, but not all people of faith are irrational. Science requires observation and evidence. It's easy for me to go down this rabbit hole, but here you'll see that to scientifically say something's true or not true, you have to observe it. You make a hypothesis. Then you have to experiment on your hypothesis and prove repeatedly that your hypothesis is true. Theology is a branch of science. It is, as defined, theology is the science, the field of study and analysis that treats God and God's attributes and relations to the universe, study of divine beings, divine things, or religious truth or divinity. Theology is just one branch of science. So technically, if you're a preacher, a pastor, a teacher, anyone who studies the Bible, when you are studying the Bible, you are engaging in scientific exploration, just like an astronomer, when he examines the universe and these great celestial objects, he is engaging in scientific behavior. Faith is not the opposite of science. The opposite of science is ignorance. And I don't mean that in an insulting way. Basically science is having knowledge. Ignorance is ignoring or rejecting that, or not, I can't use rejecting, is the ignoring or the not knowing of that data. A quote Christian ignoring all the observational data that we live on a spherical earth and cherry picking scriptures to propose a flat earth dome theory is just as bad as a secular scientist without any data to prove his hypothesis that complex life began began from lightning flashing through methane-rich atmosphere to create amino acids that formed into proteins that formed strands of DNA, and so on and so forth. The opposite of faith is disbelief. When I sit in a chair, and basically the definition of faith is complete trust or confidence in someone or something. So when I sit in a chair, through observation and experimentation through my life, I know that a chair will support my weight. If I see a rickety chair and I go to sit down and I feel it and it's like, whoa, this thing feels wobbly, I may not sit in that chair because I might be afraid that that chair is going to collapse under my weight. Then I do not put faith in that chair. So the question here is, who do you trust? Do you trust scientists like Carl Sagan, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Stephen Hawking? Are they the people you put your trust in? Darwin? Or do you trust yourself? Just what you know and what you see? That can be dangerous because you don't know everything. I don't know everything. Or do we trust God? The God that made the universe, if you believe that, do you trust the one who said, hey, I made this? So in Genesis 1:1 states that God is, so first we have a God, that he exists, and he created the heaven and the earth. If you cannot accept that God exists, then what's the rest of this book to you? Is it a fairy tale? Or is it a work of historical fiction where when we see things in the Bible that we know to be true, we say those are true, but these things that we don't know, we can't prove, we don't understand, that's allegory. It's, it's fiction, it's poetry. Somebody's making some stuff up. If you believe that God exists, then this is the testimony of how he created the world and the universe. Creation then becomes, creation is no longer some random natural process, but a supernatural event by a supernatural being. Neither secularists nor creationists can prove or disprove how God created but we have to have faith that God created. We either are going to believe that there is a God, he through his holy word has revealed how he created this world, or this book doesn't matter, and we're going to trust what the scientists say. Don't get me wrong, I am not anti-science. Many of our great scientists were Christians. They believed in God, and they believed that through scientific exploration, they were understanding the universe that God had made. Have we gotten things wrong? Absolutely. We have, the Bible is not primarily a scientific textbook. So as time went on, we've learned things. So, definitions are important. So, let's look at a couple key words here. It says God created the heaven and the earth. Well, what's heaven? Is heaven that image that we see in popular media today? It's a place where angels are flying around playing harps and everybody's sitting on a cloud happy as can be? No. To the Jewish person, and you have to remember and always take the Bible in context. Remember in the introduction, I told you that the book of Genesis, the strongest evidence is this is God talking to Moses on Mount Sinai, revealed to Moses how he created the earth. And to the And who was Moses writing to? He was writing to the Hebrew people in the wilderness between Egypt and the Promised Land. So to the Jewish person, there are three heavens. The first heaven is what you and I today would call the sky, the atmosphere. When you get in an airplane and you fly somewhere, you are flying within the first heaven. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin took off in Apollo 11 and left the Earth's atmosphere to travel to the moon, they were flying through the second heaven, which is what we call space. And then the third heaven, that is where God lives. It's a supernatural realm where God and his angels reside. There are many people who propose there is a gap of time between verses 1 and verse 2. This explanation is given because we live in a world where we see stars and galaxies billions of light years away. So to account for this, the hypothesis is there was some global cataclysm, and when it says God moved upon the face of the waters of the deep, there are some who get really deep into Hebrew and stuff trying to say that God recreated the earth. I don't believe this. I believe this is like a person. Imagine if you're a painter or a sculptor. So when verses 1 and 2, it's like the painter or sculptor getting all their supplies together and setting everything up. They've got their paints, they've got their easel, they've got their clay or rock or stone, whatever medium they're going to work on, and they're getting ready to make a painting or a sculpture. So let's look at verses 3 through 5. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. So, now that God has created the heavens and the earth, they've got them in place, he basically turns on the light. Think about it. You've gathered up all your supplies. If you're a painter or sculptor, I've got everything. Well, it probably helps to have good light to look at what you're looking at. Note that this light is not the sun. We're going to see the sun in a little bit, but right now, this light is not the sun. This is a supernatural light created by God. Verses 1 and 2, we see God created space-time because it says in the beginning. So God is eternal. God existed in eternity past, and he will exist in eternity future. So, if you want to get really high into physics and stuff, you'll learn that physicists make they don't refer to space and time separately. Space-time is always combined. So we've got God creating space-time in the beginning. God created the heavens and the earth. So we've got space-time and we have matter. Now, God creates, in verses 3 through 5, now God is creating energy and motion. What is light? Light is an expression of energy. Solar panels, they harness light and convert it into electrical current. We see that he separated the light from the darkness, he called night. And so I believe that, here you have this ball of water in the sky, and he puts a light on it, and he starts spinning around. And this is the end of the first day, or Sunday if we use today's terminology. Let's address an elephant here in the room. There are some who teach, because of all the scientific advancements we've made, they want to still be Christian, but we can't deny some of the things we've learned. So, and if we take things like the Big Bang and evolution and those things as fact, then how do we reconcile this 6 days of creation story? Well, people will take scripture way over in the New Testament where God tells Peter, or Peter tells us that to God, 1,000 days is as a year, and a year is as 1,000 days. Well, if you look at the context of that scripture, Peter is talking about the end times. What he's saying is, don't let people, people are going to come in the last days saying, things have always been the way they are. They'll always continue to be this way. Don't believe, these Christians who talk about the world's coming to an end. And Peter says, those people will come, but, understand that God, essentially what he's saying is God is timeless. To an eternal being, 1,000 years is nothing. And a day, depending on how deep you want to look into it, could be 1,000 years. You'll see this theme throughout the rest of this chapter where they say, and the evening and the morning were the first day. Evening and the morning is how the Jewish people see a 24-hour period of time. If you know a Orthodox Jewish person, or someone who's Jewish today, you'll know that for their Sabbath day stuff, they need to get off before the sun goes down on Friday night. Why? Because to a Jewish person, the day does not begin and end at midnight. It begins when the sun sets. So, when it first gets dark and the sun's gone, that's the end of that day, and a new day starts at whatever time sunset occurred. We may think that's weird, but it's actually a better way to keep time. Example, we say in our modern world that a day begins and ends at midnight. What about in countries where you observe daylight savings time? You pick a day where you spring forward an hour, fall back an hour. So why do you do it at 2 o'clock in the morning? Because if you did it at midnight, that would mess up all the world's computers, because they say, like, on daylight savings time, when you get to 1:59 and it becomes 2 a.m., boom, all of a sudden it's 3 a.m. Or in the fall, when it's 1:59, it doesn't go to 2, it goes back to 1 a.m. But if you did it at midnight, you would be, throwing everything off, because now you've got, here it is Monday, it's 11:59 p.m. and it's, we're going to fall back to go to standard time because we're in daylight savings time now. So boom, it becomes Monday. Becomes midnight, which is actually Tuesday. But no, let's go back. We got another hour to do in Monday. See how confusing that can be? Where, in a day and age before everybody had a clock on their phone or wrist or whatever, it was easiest to say that the day ended at sunset and that began a new day. So if it's 7 p.m. and it's dark where you are right now watching this video, and you're watching this video on Tuesday, in a Jewish mindset, it would be Wednesday already. Hope that makes sense. Genesis 1, verses 6 through 8. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. So, all right, now let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's take God's word at face value. So at the end of the first day, we essentially, and I've got some illustrations here at the bottom. First day, you got basically a big ball of water without form, voidless, but we got light shining on it. You know, and it's spinning. So there's a light and a dark side. On day 2, God creates a firmament. So what is a firmament? Well, the firmament is what we would call today our atmosphere. But remember, I told you the Jewish people believed in 3. Why? Because in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, God created the heavens and the earth. So think about this. So God created heaven and earth already. Then he says, let's put a firmament in the midst of the waters, that means in between, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. So, you know, we've got essentially what we see in the illustration on my little day 2 thing on the bottom right hand side of your screen. You've got, this is how I picture it. You've got water, you've got air or atmosphere, and then you got water again. So note, you know, this is different than what we see today. You know, now, again, I know this seems crazy. We know when we launch rockets, they don't crash into a wall of water. What was the upper firmament like? I honestly don't know. Just like I don't know how our atmosphere doesn't bleed off into the vacuum of space. If I go up in the International Space Station, which is technically in the upper atmosphere of the Earth, because it does experience some drag and they have to adjust for that, or else it'll come crashing down to Earth. Let's go outside Earth. So let's say I'm in, you know, Apollo 13 when they had their little accident. What if the side of the interior of that spacecraft had been punctured? All the air would have leaked from outside that spacecraft into the vacuum of space. Now, I know intellectually that gravity holds our atmosphere in place, but with solar winds constantly pushing against our planet and rockets pushing through, you know, like you think about like a fish jumping out of water. A fish jumps out of water and the water splashes up, but then it falls back down. I understand that that's gravity doing that. I'm sure something like that's happening with air, which is, you know, if you ever take fluid dynamics, you know, air and water are both fluids. It's just, you know, air is a less dense fluid. So, you know, but if I can stand on the International Space Station, if I were to go on a spacewalk, again, I'm not an expert in orbital mechanics, but if from the International Space Station I take a baseball and throw it as hard as I can away from the Earth, I don't know if that'll give it enough velocity to completely escape Earth's orbit, but how does that not happen on Earth when, you know, the Earth's rotating around the sun and the side that's facing the sun's getting bombarded with these particles coming from the sun, and our magnetic field protects us from a lot of this. But what keeps from other forces just knocking that air off to where it becomes thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner until one day we're like the moon and essentially have no atmosphere? So, you know, to me, it seems if there was something more substantial above us than there is today. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, you know, because there is water moisture and stuff, but, you know, we're going to see here in a moment that we're going to talk about the sun, the moon, the stars, and using these for reference. There are some creation scientists that say that there was a layer of ice, like, there was a hard frozen layer of ice around the planet. I don't know. And I don't know that we can know for certain what was the case, but I do know whatever was there, we had to be able to see through it. So we couldn't have been like Venus or Saturn or one of these other planets that have such thick cloud layers, or not Saturn, but Titan. Saturn's moon, Titan, they say is probably one of the closest uh, bodies to Earth, and and it has a solid core to it, but there's this real thick, and we've actually sent a probe down into Titan, and we've seen this. We know this for a fact, that there's a very thick cloud layer that you cannot see the surface of the planet, but there is a surface there, or moon. Same thing with Venus. There's a surface to Venus, but we can't see it because there is a cloud layer. So if whatever this firmament was a thick cloudy layer, we would not be able to see through it to see these things that are mentioned later, like the sun, the moon, the stars. The sun and moon would just be glows against this opaque background. Let's look at verses 9 through 13. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, and the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and the herb yielding seed after its kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. So on Tuesday, God causes land to appear by gathering the waters together. I picture it as that the land was there the whole time, but it was hidden by water. So, just in a kind of weird, in my head, imagine you were able to hold a ball of water, but under that ball of water you had clay, and you wanted water to pool in certain places. You could take your hand and just poke into that clay and make certain parts of the clay deeper so that all the water would run into those parts. God then causes plants to grow and trees, and that those plants have specific kinds. So God made apple trees, he made peach trees, he made pear trees, he made, cashew trees, he made he made wheat, he made corn, he made any plant. He made your herbs, which, I mean, you think of herbs, you think of your spices and stuff. He made the jalapeno plants. He made all those things and causes them to grow. This ends Tuesday. I made a mistake here on my slide, and I called it as I was doing this presentation. This is not the first time he causes creation good. He did that in the last section. But when God says he's good, it means it's perfect. Imagine an artist creating something, sculpture, painting, whatever. When he's saying it's good, he's saying it's done, it's finished, it's perfect. I don't need to touch it up anymore. It's the Hebrew word tov. And another interesting fact here is Tuesday is the only day he does it twice. In fact, I read somewhere years ago that traditionally in Jewish families, a lot of times weddings were scheduled on Tuesdays because it was considered to be a double blessed day. So, that ends Tuesday. Let's look at Wednesday. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. Let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. So then God makes the sun, moon, and I love how God, he's so powerful. It's like, yeah, I made the stars too. The stars are almost a footnote. I am a super nerd, okay? If we had the space travel capability that you see in Star Wars or Star Trek or something, I would love to spend my days, getting in a spaceship and going close up and looking at these beautiful, wonderful things that God has made in the celestial heavens. So, but we got some problems here that this presents us. For the creationists, here's a problem. How could the sun, moon, and stars be used for signs and seasons if they're light years away? Well, obviously the sun and moon are not light years away, but and you'll also so they're not light years away, but our nearest star, Alpha Centauri, is anyway, closest star is 4 light years away. Space is unbelievably huge, despite what you see on science fiction shows and stuff. And you can trust the documentaries on Discovery and History and all these about this. If I were a person, if I were representing the sun, and you wanted to get the same distance away from me that the Earth is from the sun, you would have to be about a little over 2 football fields away from me. And as small as you look to me, you would actually be smaller, because if, for my size, I'm almost 6 feet. So if I had a 6-foot diameter ball, and I put the earth 644 yards, I believe it is, or 600, not yards, 644 feet away from that, that the earth would be like, I think, an inch size ball. That's how huge space is. The truth is, I don't know. No more than I know if God created, now we're taking this literal now, guys. If God created the plants and trees on Tuesday, how did Adam and Eve have anything to eat when they were created on Friday? We're on Wednesday, so he created on Tuesday trees. Well, my wife and I, we bought an orange tree, and it was a small orange tree. It wasn't, It was like a little plant in a small, like, I don't know what the small size pots are, but I mean, it was like, when you go to Lowe's and you see like where they've got rosemary and stuff, it was a small pot. Like, it was initially so small that when, we're picking weeds and stuff in the garden, I'm having a look at my wife. I'm like, is this a weed or a tree? That's how small it was. So we planted that 7 years ago. This year is the first year it started to show oranges, and the thing is only maybe 3 feet tall. So I don't know how all this happened. Creation was, I believe, a supernatural event. I think maybe that when he created the plants, like when you see these time-lapse videos of a plant or something growing, I think that happened, but like if you could have, been standing beside God when he said, let the earth bring forth the green herb and trees and everything, I think you would have seen over that 24-hour day, you would see like go from rocks to lush orchards and forests, and it would just boom, spring up within a 24-hour period. When it comes to light, God could have created light in transit. We know the speed of light. It's a constant. But who says that it had to be constant when it was created? God could have accelerated the speed of light. It could be that the Lord created things closer to the earth and then he spread them out over time. We don't know. I can guess, we can make some educated guesses, but me not knowing doesn't make what God says true. He was there, I was not. Who am I to second guess the God of the universe on how he did something? When I get to heaven, if he has classes or he allows me to ask questions and stuff, or if he lets me watch a video he recorded of him making the earth, you better believe I will be one of the first saints in heaven wanting to see, how did God make this earth and this universe that we live in? It has to be the most spectacular thing you've ever seen. This also causes a problem for those folks who want to do the day-age theory. If you say that, oh, well, God created the world, but he did it on kind of an evolutionary model. So they're looking at it and it's like, okay, so he creates the plants. Then he creates the sun millions of years later. How did the plants survive without the sun? And you might say, well, plants, they're resilient. They, photosynthesis still occurred off this supernatural light that he was using. Could be, maybe not. But again, it doesn't solve the problem. Without the sun, I mean, what kind of light was this? Did this light have heat? We need the sun not just for light, but we need it for heat. If we didn't have the sun, we'd be living on an ice ball right now. For the secularists, there are all kinds of problems. If there was a Big Bang, why is everything red shifted? If you don't know what I mean, that's talking about the Doppler effect, that the light waves coming from all these celestial objects, for the most part, appear to be moving away from us. Why is everything moving away from us? If something explodes, okay, if Earth happens to be at the center of that explosion, that kind of would make sense, that we're matter that was close to the source of that explosion. But that's not what the theory teaches. It teaches that actually we're on the outside and we're looking back towards an explosion that happened. We and everything else is flying away. But if you've ever seen an explosion, explosions are rarely uniform. So yes, we would be moving away from certain things, but wouldn't some things be moving towards us? the effects of gravity, there's all kinds of things. And again, you know, uh, you follow the evolutionary model. How is all the things happening with Earth to where, you know, we happen to be tilted at a perfect 23-degree angle, which gives us our seasons? We're not, spinning. Or why aren't we like, was it Uranus or Neptune, that it actually spins around on its axis, like the sun is pointing towards like its south pole, and it's rolling like a ball around in its orbit? And why does Venus spin backwards? It's the only one that does retrograde, but then all the planets spin the same direction. And there's so many things, and the way, like, our solar system, if you've ever looked at a map and you look, Earth is on the tingle arm of the Milky Way galaxy. We're on the outside edge of our galaxy. And, following the secular theories, spiral galaxies like the Milky Way, eventually, as they turn around, the spiral's arms come in tighter and tighter and tighter. So why are we not seeing anything moving closer to us? Because if we follow the theory, we have maybe a big, giant, supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy, and everything's rotating around it, but then it's getting closer and our galaxy's getting packed more densely. Why are we not seeing evidence of those things? So that ends Wednesday. Thursday, and God said, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and the fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven." And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth." And the evening and the morning were the fifth day. So this is fairly straightforward. God creates birds and marine life. Interesting to note here, not only does God say that they're good, but he actively blesses them, and it's like he's communicating with them and tells them to be fruitful and multiply. Also notice that, God says in verse 20, "And the moving creature that hath life." This is the first time we're using the word life. So to God, there seems to be a difference, in our vernacular today. I look at a tree and I say that tree's alive. I see the grass, that grass is alive. I see that rose is alive. But there's a difference between plant life and animal life. And there also seems to be some type of consciousness and the ability to communicate. And we know that animals have ways. Birds sing, dolphins speak to each other. When we get to the terrestrial animals, we know cats, dogs, they have ways to communicate with one another, and that denotes some type of intelligence. So we end Thursday. Friday, and God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind." And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let us make man in our own image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat, and to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have made every green herb for meat. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. So the sixth day, Friday, animals were created in kinds or in species. Evolutionary thought, and this is something that even before I really studied, creationism and stuff, I never understood this. What I was taught in high school, and I know it's changed. There's different levels of evolution, but this is something I could never get over when I was in school. How does a fish decide one day, I'm tired of swimming in the water, I want to walk on land? If you take a fish, you go to a pond, you pull a fish out, you throw it on land, does it grow legs? No, it dies. If something dies, how does it evolve? I watched a documentary not too long ago that talked about, and they were talking about how, all life started in the seas of amino acids, and there were these creatures, and they would get like a dark spot on them that allowed them to tell light from lighter areas from darker areas, and went through this whole thing about how, the eyeball was created, or sorry, not created, how the eyeball just evolved on its own. But I've never understood, and to this day, there have never been any transitional forms found in the fossil record. In fact, the fact we have a fossil record is a whole nother study in and of itself of why we even have so many fossils to start with. But I would even say, with the advanced technology we have today, let's give them a chance. Let's do some science here. I have a hypothesis that I can take a methane-rich atmosphere, I can run an electrical current through it. That electrical current, I can create amino acids. Then I want to take those amino acids and I want them to figure out how to get into DNA by themselves. And then I want that DNA to arrange itself. If you just start asking questions of the theories, just like people do, they want to point out these supernatural things. I can't tell you how God did it. I don't know how God made a cow. The Bible tells me he said, let the earth bring forth cattle and creeping things. And they were there. It's supernatural. It's outside a natural explanation. I cannot use natural rules to define how the supernatural works. And we see that God defined these living creatures into species. You can't, you can nowadays in a test tube or something, you can try to force, say, like a cat and a dog's DNA and try to insert it into a pre-fertilized embryo and you might get some aberration of nature, but until recently, that was something unheard of. To the evolutionary scientists, I get evolution takes millions and billions of years. But if it takes millions and billions of years, you know, naturally, how come we can't replicate that in a lab? You know, make a dog and start with nothing. I'll even be generous. I will let you start with proteins. Start with that. Don't interject any DNA from anything that God's already created. You create from the base chemicals, adenine, guanine, thymine, forgetting one of the four chemicals that make up DNA, but you take the four chemicals that make up DNA, you figure out a way to mix it up, and that's with you intervening. I mean, we create all kinds of wonderful things, but we have to be involved in its creation. I read an article years ago where famous folks who used to believe in evolution, they don't necessarily believe in creationism because they still think religion has no place in science. So but one prominent and I cannot remember his name, and I should have looked it up before I did this study, but he said the more he thought about it, the idea that life would just come about by natural processes made about as much sense as a tornado going through a junkyard and a 57 Chevy coming out of that tornado. That's the smart theory. I'm the idiot, because I believe that a supernatural, all-powerful God said he spoke the words and created these things. I'm the dummy, but we can come up with all these other things. Or another prominent thing, especially on the History Channel, I watch it sometimes just because I'm amazed how ludicrous it gets sometimes, where if you've ever seen that show, Ancient Aliens, where, and I think it was Francis Crick, who was the founder of DNA. He basically denied evolution, but then he came up with this idea called panspermia, that, okay, well, we know that things couldn't have just evolved naturally, so some supernatural race came in and intervened, and you'll now hear things like intelligent design. Intelligent design can be used to talk about creation, meaning the intelligence is God. But some people will say, well, God is a highly evolved being that, interfered, a being or groups of beings, and they interfered and helped make humanity what it is today. Well, all you've done is you've moved the problem into outer space. Who created God? How did God come to be? So if evolution can't work here on Earth, well, where do you get these aliens to come and interfere with our creation? And let me say this. I'm sorry I'm going on too many tangents here, and I apologize. But Carl Sagan was, talking about, he founded SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And one of, I think it's the Fermi paradox, I believe, where if you take the numbers of stars and you estimate how many stars have planets, and those planets being in the right location to support life, what the probability is, and because of the vastness of space and the amount of stuff out there, then that must mean that there are tons of other people. But when we looked at God creating the sun, the moon, it's like, oh, and he created the stars also. They were thrown in like an afterthought. So it could be God could have created other life, but in my worldview, I believe that if God created life elsewhere in the universe, that life was created by the same God that we're reading about here. Or it could be that Earth is unique, and that gets into what they call the Fermi paradox, where people, these brilliant scientists are like, if there were other people out there and they had like TV and radio and all this stuff, and we've got all these telescopes pointing up into the sky, why haven't we ever heard another signal? Well, space is very big, so maybe they are really, really far away from us. But after what now, 50 plus years of us trying to look for, existence of intelligence outside outside our solar system, we haven't been able to find even a hint or a shred. So either God created people and they are so far from us, and because of our sinful nature, he wouldn't want them to interact with us, or if they did know we existed, they wouldn't want to interact with us. Or it could mean that we are here all along. So what does it mean that man is created in the image of God? Does that mean God has 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, 1 nose, a mouth? No. If you'll notice, it says, God says, let us make God in our own image. Notice that these pronouns are plurals. So we'll talk about this, and I've talked about this in some other videos, that God is a Trinity. He's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. There are 3 parts. The thing that makes man unique from all the other animals is that we have a body, a soul, and a spirit. We have 3 things. Most likely, animals, unless I'm wrong, they have a body and a spirit, but they don't have a soul. If you're a pet lover, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to, hurt your feelings. I mean, I have 3 dogs sitting in here watching me record this, look at me like I'm crazy. But I know my dogs have feelings. I've got one that he's scared of everything. Another one thinks, they're all 3 Chihuahuas. One thinks he's a pit bull, and one, he's just weird. So he likes to eat. I can see differences in their personality. But they don't have a soul. Also, we see something else interesting that was different about the way the world was versus the way it is today. In the beginning, man and beast were vegetarian, because God says to the man and the beast that the green herb and the fruit of the tree, that is for meat, or that's Old English for food. So man and beast were vegetarian. Now, we'll get there eventually. And I'm not going to go into it here because it won't be that long down the road. But this is not saying, right now, if you're not a vegetarian, you're a heathen, you need to pray for repentance, throw out all the chicken and beef in your fridge, and start eating lettuce. That's not what I'm saying, because it was even the beast. The lion didn't eat the gazelle after God created the earth. The lion ate grass like an ox. We know that in the future, when Christ comes back, that's going to happen again. You're not going to have to worry when you're walking along and you see a lion or a tiger. You're not going to have to worry that the thing's going to jump on you and eat your face off, because it's going to eat grass. It's going to eat, vegetation. Um, and then, we'll get into why humans started eating meat and all that stuff when we get to around Genesis chapter 9. But just know that at this point in time, man and beast did not eat meat. There was no death to eat meat. There has to be death because something has to die for you to eat meat. Then God blesses his creation. He looks over it and he's, ecstatic as creation, and that ends Friday. Well, we finished the chapter, right? Let's hold up just a second. Let's look at Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. The chapters and verses that we see in our Bible were not in the original manuscripts. Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 through 2 verse 3 are an overview of creation. Next time, we're going to take a deeper dive looking at Friday, the day that God created man, because we're going to focus in. And basically we're told here that he spent Saturday admiring his creation. I almost imagine he spends much of this day with his special creation of man, talking with man, probably answering tons of questions and, communing with man, and also just admiring. If you have skill, I wish I had this skill, but let's say, you're real good at fixing up cars and stuff, and you've been working, for, a long period of time. And, again, this is 6 24-hour days, but it's a lot of stuff that God's doing in those 6 24-hour days. So God's, it's like a man or woman who works on a car, gets it painted perfectly, got the engine sounding just right, and then, the day they get it done, they finish, they do that one last whip of the towel, waxing that one last piece of a bumper or panel or something, and they step back and they admire it, and they spend the rest of the day just driving that beautiful machine that they've spent so long and laboring to put together. That's essentially what God does on the seventh day. So next time, we'll start with chapter 2, verse 4. Again, with this channel, if you are part of a small group, if you're doing this for kind of a daily devotional, and I know these videos are long, so feel free to, do a little part, then, come back. But I've created some discussion questions. There are no right or wrong answers. This is for you to think and discuss about. You can ask questions in the comments section below. Please keep it civil. And if you disagree with me, that's fine. That's your prerogative. So let's just take a quick look at these. Just to give you time to, jot these questions down or pause the video at this point. But I know sometimes when you pause on YouTube, all the pause and all these other things get in your way. So, question 1, what or who are you placing your faith in? I talked about faith at the beginning. It's basically anyone or anything that you place your trust in. We all have a measure of faith. So what are you putting that faith in? Give some examples of things that you put your faith in every day. You don't have to make this religious. Like the chair example I gave. Do you have faith when you get in your car to drive to work? Do you have faith that you're going to get there safely? So Give some examples of things that you place your faith in every day. Have you heard of the gap theory before this video today? That there's a large gap of time between verse 1 and verse 2? What do you think of the gap theory? Well, I kind of gave you my take on it. What do you think? Do you think that theory has any merit? Do you see any reason in the text to interpret a day as anything other than a 24-hour period of time? What do you think the firmament is? Am I wrong in how I'm reading that? Do you have a different picture that comes into play? What problems are there for the day-age theory of creation when we look at the biblical creation account? And let me just say this, the day-age theory, it's also sometimes called theistic evolution, like evolution happened the way we think it did, but God did it. Well, if that was true, that little amoeba, what did it eat? What did the amoeba eat, and what ate the amoeba? And again, how do you go from being a fish to some amphibious life form to a mammal that can't breathe water? I mean, if we all came from water, I would love to have that gift. I'd love to go swimming and never have to worry about drowning, because in my ancient past, my ancient ancestors used to have the ability to breathe underwater. You talk about change and how evolution supposedly we benefit and stuff. Man, if you could breathe in water and on land, that would be a much useful ability to have than just breathing air alone. What are some of the problems that you see there for a theory of evolution? Let me ask you, does not having an answer for how or why something exists, is it automatic proof that that idea is wrong? When I was a kid, I'm sure I asked my mom or dad, "Hey, Mom, Dad, why is the sky blue?" Now, there's a scientific explanation why the sky is blue, but because I was a child and I didn't know why the sky was blue, does that make it mean that the sky is not really blue? Do you think the creation account is to be taken literally, or do you think this passage is allegorical? With everything we know today, can the creation story fit into a modern day worldview? Or are people like me and folks who believe like me, are we old-fashioned and out of touch with reality? And I know there are some who have made it hard for people like me. We're seen as backwards or willfully ignorant, but that's not necessarily the case. You can love science and you can love your Bible. They're not mutually exclusive. Here's what I would be interested in. And some of the things, and there are channels out there like Answers in Genesis. I've been watching videos on a YouTube channel recently, Is Genesis History? Go check some of their videos out. They get really deep into the science and stuff. I'd be interested in knowing if in today's world, if we assume the creation account's true and some of the things we think the earth was like before, what would happen if we did things like opened greenhouses and increased the air pressure and increased the oxygen percentage a little bit? Would we get bigger plants? There's a whole bunch of things, and we'll get into some of those later. So thank you for watching this video. Again, please remember to like and subscribe to this video. Hit that notification bell to be informed when I upload a new video. If you're new here, You can check out our other videos on how to study the Bible. If you want to take a deeper dive into this scripture, or you want to look at other chapters, or do something like this at your own pace, I encourage you, don't trust what I say. Don't wait on me to create videos, because it takes me more time to create these videos than I would like it to. So with that, thank you and God bless, and have a great day.